Today, you're invited to be a fly on the wall while I make this Irish sea moss volumizing hair mask. This combination of oils and conditioning treatment is a specialized product for hair that needs a deep oil treatment and leaves a rich volumizing texture behind. The specific recipe for this deep moisturizing treatment is published and ready to print, along with the exclusive video discussing the entire recipe for members at Thermal Mermaid at the link below. In today's video, I'm going to discuss two topics about this particular hair mask that you can incorporate into your own recipes when you're making similar products. And these topics are creating products that have a good, stable texture and ingredients that will add a volume to your hair. Now first, we're going to cover a unique way to stabilize this light, fluffy conditioning treatment so that the product stays light and fluffy. And since this is so dense with butters and oils, you're already getting a lot of oil in a very small amount. So we want to fluff this up so that when you go to use it, you're not using too much oil, which will end up leaving your hair heavy and limp. And when we whip our oils into the product, we want that to stay that way as long as the product is in the container and not end up deflating when your customer goes to use it. And one way to get great long-term stabilization is by incorporating Irish sea moss. Irish sea moss is an algae that comes in either golden or purple, and it's found all through the Atlantic Ocean. And if you're on the eastern seaboard, you can wildcraft harvest this yourself. And if you aren't, then you can find it packaged as a food product on Amazon or even in your health food store. Now, traditionally, this has been used in New England to make something called Irish pudding, which is a dessert. And as you watch me process this down, you'll see at the end why pioneers would definitely use this as a food product, because if you make this pleasant enough to eat, that gel that it creates will absolutely fill your stomach if you don't end up having a full supper plate in front of you. Now, as for its nootropic value, there are plenty of claims. Still, not much study's been done, so it's another one of those health food items that have perceived benefits that basically remain anecdotal. But like many seaweeds and algae, this is packed full of minerals. In fact, Irish sea moss has 92 essential minerals that you need in your body to function. And while skincare and cosmetics have its darling vitamin treatments, you can really get a bang of a beautiful result if you happen to be in need of a mineral treatment and you come across this ingredient. This sea moss that you see here arrived to me mostly dried out and covered in sand. So here I'm lightly cleaning it before I begin to process this. And even after soaking this for about 20 minutes, you can start to see that it's beginning to rehydrate, and it takes on a much stronger, smooth texture when you compare the two side by side. When I begin to boil this down, I'm going to extract the gel in two different ways. Now I'm starting with 8 ounces of dehydrated moss here, and this is going to end up giving me about 3 pounds of gel, and I can end up making several projects with just this. Now when you start to work with this amount of gel, what you will get will depend on how much water that you process into it, and how much water you process into it will give you a different texture of gel. If you end up adding a lot of water, the gel will end up being like a thick soup, and you could even get as much as 8 pounds out of this once you're finished processing. If you add less water, what you'll end up getting is a thick block of gelatin, and then you can end up cutting that into squares and incorporating that into your recipes that way. Now, how you decide to make and store the gel is up to you, and it depends on what kind of product that you want to make. Personally, I like to store this as a thick block of gel and then cut it up into smaller pieces as I need it, and I keep this in the refrigerator. Remember, this is a food product, so we don't store this in counters, shelves, anything like that. If you leave it out, you've got about 24 hours before it needs to be thrown out. Put it in the fridge or in the freezer, and you've got several months out of it. So as I'm boiling this down, I'm going to end up extracting the gel in two different ways. This carrageenan, it's steeping into the water, and as it's breaking down and being released into the water, the plant is also expanding and bloating. And all of this is going to end up getting processed together. All the water that you see here is going to turn into the same thick consistency as the moss itself after it gets blended down. Even when I separate the water from the blended moss and put it in the fridge for 24 hours, the water will turn into a solid gelatin. So this boiling water is being completely saturated with the body of the moss. The time that you want to take to boil this down is completely up to you, but I've given mine a solid simmer at 40 minutes because I want the moss to fall apart when I stir it, and it's going to end up blending it nicely. Now, once I'm ready to remove the heat, I end up straining the moss, and that's going to break it down some more. So by separating the fluid, this is going to allow me to control the consistency as I'm blending it down. Now you can add it all right back in together once it's all in the blender, or you can use the fluid to nurse that moss into a softer and softer state while it's being blended. But no matter how you process it down, with the amount of water that you see here, the final result is going to be a thick block of gel once it cools. So if you want to keep this thin like pudding, what you have to do is add additional water after it's been all processed, and then you have to watch it as it cools, and you have to keep adding water until you get it to the texture that you want. So you could end up with a real tremendous amount of this gel in the form of a pudding, even as much as 8 pounds, as I said before. But as you've seen me process down just this 8 ounces of sea moss, I'm going to get about 3 pounds of gel out of it. Now, because I'm creating a thick gelatin sea moss, my hair mask is going to be whipped to a texture like Cool Whip. But if you want this to be a bit more dense, like a thicker butter, then you would end up making the gel itself a little bit more pudding-like. Now, the finished product that you see here it's going to stay light and whipped for as long as you have it, and it will last on the shelves, basically for as long as you have it on the shelves. This is the ingredient added into the butters and added into all the oils that's going to allow for it to remain light and fluffy and to keep your product stable. Now, for those of you who make products to sell, yes, you must add a preservative. I'm going to answer that before you even ask it in the comments. With this particular product, I would not even make it for personal use unless I added a preservative. Sometimes you hear me say in my videos how I'll always put a preservative in an item that needs it if I'm intending to gift it or sell it, but for myself, I'm totally comfortable with putting something in the fridge and not adding a preservative. Not this product. With this particular product, I did do an experiment, and I took a jar of this and I left it sitting at room temperature for about 2 weeks, and there was plenty of mold and bacteria in the jar. Not a lot. It wasn't a little mold nursery, but I did set it directly in the window just specifically to watch for bacterial growth. So this should be treated like any other food product. Nothing surprising there. It is not an oil, and there's nothing in this that would inhibit bacterial growth if you left it alone. So just keep that in mind when you're making it. So as you see here, this has been completely blended and processed down, and I have this beautiful gel. Now this is still warm. It's still nice and loose, and it's kind of halfway between that gelatin and pudding texture, but this is hot. And once we get this in the refrigerator for 24 hours, along with the liquid water that was left over, as you see here, they're both going to be the exact same texture. And now you have a new option for a stabilizer that you can put into your creams, your lotions, your body butters, and in this case, a cream hair mask. Now, in a later video that I have prepared for next week, you're going to see me make the popular chocolate body butter that's on this channel, and this time we're going to add in the sea moss and add that as a stabilizer, and then we'll discuss how those two recipes are different and how you can get a better idea on how this ingredient will enhance your lotions. Now, we're going to move along to topic 2 in today's video, and that's how to add ingredients for volumizing your hair. And before we do that, I just wanted to show you the next video that's coming up for tomorrow. It's fall, and all the soapers are rolling out their autumn holiday soaps. So in the next video, I'm going to make these autumn leaves for you in a cold process soap project. So if you'd like to see this project coming up, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notifications so you don't miss out on this next video. Now, as I'm blending down the ingredients to my hair mask, I'm going to discuss an oil that's known for creating fuller, thicker hair and what's really going on when you get this effect. Now, although all the other butters and waxes are for moisturizing and creating a silky texture, I'm going to be adding castor oil that will help make the hair thicker. And in this case, I'm just adding a very small amount into the total ingredients. Castor oil is a thick, sticky, viscous oil, and when it's added to herbal shampoos, it's claimed to make the hair thick and full. Now, if you have normal hair, this absolutely does work. You'll feel an effect after just one use. However, this is not making the hair itself thicker. It's not making your actual hair shaft thicker. This is just putting a waxy coating across the shaft that's sticking to the hair, and that will remain sometimes for several days, even sometimes until the next washing. Now, typically this is used as an occasional treatment, because if you do use it too much, it can create buildup, and eventually your hair can start to become matted even. That's very rare. There are actually some PubMed articles with castor oil in some extremely rare cases where hair does not react well and it ends up becoming matted, as they describe, like a bird's nest. Not good. It's not something that you want. Fortunately, there are only 14 reported cases in the world of that happening, so this is not common, but it's something that's been written about. But under normal circumstances, you'll end up just being satisfied with the thickness before you ever get that far to have used it too much. Now, one of the other qualities of using castor oil is that it can end up trapping moisture, and your hair can end up feeling wet for a longer time after you get out of the shower. So as I said before, this recipe specifically that you're watching me make here is customized for those who need deep moisturizing treatment. It's not for everyday use, but if your hair has the right kind of need, if it's light, if it's dry, if you need to oil your hair and your scalp regularly, then this is an amazing combination with the Irish sea moss and a touch of castor oil that goes into all the regular butters and waxes that you would put into your hair mask. Now, don't confuse this with ingredients like peppermint, which are claimed to make your hair grow longer faster. That doesn't happen with castor oil. And again, peppermint, the claims with peppermint, there is some evidence behind that. There's also another PubMed article that discusses peppermint and hair growth if you're interested in that. With castor oil, there's no growth promotion. It's just a coating on the shaft of the hair that will give you the feeling of thickness and volume, and it feels absolutely lovely. So adding castor oil is completely optional in hair products like these. For everyday use, you may not want to see such an aggressive, heavy treatment, and if your hair and scalp tend to lean more toward the oily side, then you might use lighter oils in your mask like soybean and e-waxes. So I know soapers tend to stay away from the soybean oil, but I'll just remind you, that's because soybean's not a fabulous oil for soap making, and it's not really even a healthy oil to eat, but there's a ton of evidence that it is good for skin as a soothing anti-inflammatory, and it also does not dry the skin as much as the oleic acids. So soybean oil is actually fabulous for your lotions, even before your olive oil and your avocado oils, and they're also lovely. So soybean is the oil that you would replace with this if you wanted to go in the other direction with this mask. If you had hair that was already on the oily side and you still wanted to give it a mask with that thick, beautiful Irish sea moss. And so as today's project is finished being whipped, you can get an up-close look at just how beautiful it looks, and the feel is absolutely silky and amazing. Now, I've added straight coconut fragrance oil to this one, and when I use it, I'm just going to take about a quarter size amount and work that into my damp hair in the shower after it's been shampooed, and then leave it right toward the bottom and toward the back of your hair where you have most of the frizz and damage. Leave that on just for a few minutes and allow it to sit, and then rinse off. And then once you get out, you're ready to style, and you'll definitely notice how that castor oil feels, especially if you're not used to using herbal organics, and if you're not used to putting castor oil in your hair. You'll notice how that texture changes the feel of your hair on the very first use. So here we are with this finished product. Thank you for joining me today, and if you'd like to see those autumn maple trees being made right before your eyes, come back and join me in the next video.